Welcome to Tiny Hands, Big Dreams here in southern Ecuador. One of the wonderful things about moving to a different country is being exposed to new ideas and new ways of doing things. Now, I've never raised goats in any other country, so this is just how we do it here. But when I go online and I ask questions on the goat forums or something like that, there's definitely a lot of opinions that what we do here is not normal, is not right. And it's interesting because our goats are incredibly healthy and incredibly happy, living in a way that is different than the norm. So, or at least the norm in the US, I should say. So I wanted to put up a video that kind of tried to explain how we do things here and how it works for us. Now, this isn't going to work for everyone, but it at least gives the inspiration that perhaps if you want to raise goats in a very low input and cost-effective way, it's possible. It might not be possible everywhere, and it might not be possible the entire year. We don't have a winter here. If you have a winter where you are, this might not all work the same way. But it at least gives you an idea that things can be done differently than perhaps the internet tells you it can, which is sort of ironic since I'm telling you this on the internet, but that's besides the point. So here I am milking Sally. It's about 7:30 in the morning, which is the normal time I come up to milk her. And my milking routine is incredibly simple. I'm not fancy at all about it. I love it. It's a good way of starting my day. Now, maybe less of a good day when she's in a bad mood, but there are good days and bad days with everyone. So right now she's giving me about a quart of milk a day, which I know for a lot of people is small potatoes, and they would stop milking altogether at that point. But when it's the only dairy available to you, you take every little bit you can get. And I am very grateful for every little bit of it. Eventually, when I'm making aged cheeses, I will definitely be a little bit more cautious with how I handle the milk. But right now, because I'm using it basically within a day or two, and I'm not worried about aging anything, nothing super fancy here. So, like I said, right now it's about 7:30. And I milk her out, and then I'll put her away after I feed her, back into her house for a couple more hours. This just means I get the milk done first thing in the morning when it's nice and cool, and get that all done. And then in a couple hours, the whole family will come up, and we take out all the goats from their respective houses, and then we put them out on grass for the day. And we'll show you a little bit of that when the time comes. But first, I gotta feed the goat, because if you can tell, as soon as she's done being milked, she is absolutely obsessed with getting fed. So the food that we feed our goats, aside from all of the lovely greenery around here, is a little bit of grain, and that's only for pregnant or lactating does. So Sally here, she kidded back in, I think, May, and it is now the end of February, so it's been a good long time. She's still giving us some milk, so I give her a scoop. A scoop. Probably, I don't actually know how much it weighs. I've never weighed it. It's what works for her. I give her a scoop in the morning and a half a scoop in the afternoon, in the evening when we put her away, and that seems to help keep up her milk supply. Otherwise, it drops down a bit, and that's just not ideal for me. So it's purely because we want the milk. She does not need more food than the grass and browse that she gets. She would be perfectly happy on that. But to keep up the little bit of milk supply that we have, give her a little bit of grain. Now this grain, I'll give you a close-up. Can't do it now. She's eating. She would hate me. We'll give you a close-up video of it. It is about 2 parts cooey food, 2 parts corn, and 1 part oats. Now, cooey food, which is an interesting answer to the dilemma of what to feed the goat. Goat feed is not something available here. In the US, there's a lot of different goat pellets, alfalfa pellets, sweet rations. There's a lot of options. I've looked at the ingredients of them. They're not good. A lot of those ingredients are byproducts of something, which call into question the quality of them and what nutrition is left in that byproduct. So when I looked, I was trying to figure out what to feed the goats. I have fed them oats. I have fed them split peas. They really like that, but it's pretty expensive. Just corn is the typical animal feed here. Pretty much everything eats corn. Now, it's not my favorite. I don't think it's fantastic for the animals. It has no proteins. It's pure carbohydrate energy. So, when we're looking for options, well, the cooey food, which are the large guinea pigs raised here for food, it is primarily alfalfa. It also has, I believe, some corn and soy, which is, and I don't prefer to feed them soy, but again, we're working with the options that we have. So this as a food source seemed to be the closest to a solid goat ration that I could find. She does fantastic on it. She's the only one who's had it, except for our buck had a little bit when we first got him because he was a little underweight. So we gave him just a little bit of this mix, and it really helped to bulk him up a bit. He's gained some weight, and he's doing much better. So that's what we do for food. It's not ideal. I would prefer it to be something a little bit more whole, meaning I eventually want to grow sorghum. We're working on that project and be able to feed them the sorghum, which is very, very high in protein, as well as still some corn, but it would be a locally grown corn, which I think would have a little bit more nutritional value, and then possibly still the oats, because they really seem to do well on the oats, and they absolutely love it. So that's kind of what we do for food. For any pregnant or lactating doe, and otherwise they do not get grain. We'll go more into kind of what they eat later. There's lots of debates about what they need as far as food goes. I like getting in debates with people about how to raise animals, because you know what? People raise animals here completely different than in the US, and it works out fantastically. So we'll get more into that later. I'm going to finish feeding Sally and put her away.
All right, so here we are. This is our lower hill. Sometimes people say, well, what do you feed your goats? We don't feed the goats. The goats feed themselves. We simply put the goats in areas where there is things they will eat. So we got back goat back here, happily munching at all the grass she can find first. They prefer grass. There's a lot of people who will say, you know, they have to have hay. Hay is non-existent where we are. They don't eat it. But if you think about what hay is it is grass and water. Fresh grass is superior to dried grass plus water. It's one of those funny things. They love the grass. They'll eat it first. They'll eat the other stuff, the browse. They'll peck. They'll taste a tree. They occasionally bark a tree. But we put them in an area and they eat what they like. They leave. that tastes bad. There's something wrong with that. They'll leave it. They won't eat any. This is how we feed them. We don't really ever give them food unless we have to leave them for a long time inside. They get offered occasionally mineral. Mostly they don't eat it. We offer them water if it's a hot day. Sometimes they drink it. Mostly they don't. Days like today where it's overcast, nobody will drink water. We could go weeks without them taking a sip of water. It's just not something they're interested in. But the fresh grass is full of moisture at the correct ratio for the solid matter they're eating. It is what nature provides. She'll go from caved in to just blimped out like a overstuffed sandwich or something. It's kind of funny. So there we go. This is how we feed our goats. All right. Here's back oat. Hi, Bet. Yes. You can see she is all fat from the day of eating. Which is mostly grass. Some forage. It's what she wanted. Yes, all the friendly licks. Always the friendly licks. Alright. You gotta go back in your house. Alright, back you go. Alright, night. So we're putting Tiny away, as is the rest of the goats. So we keep our goats on tethers, which some people will tell you if you put it on internet forum that you are a person akin to a mass murderer. They get very emotional about it. So where we are is it's not feasible to fence it. We have some really wild land, and it's all sort of raw. We use the goats to clean the land, to keep it down, to kind of push open new areas and eat a lot of the underbrush. So tethering is really kind of the only option, short of just letting them free, which is really dangerous. Now, tethering has its downsides and it has its upsides. It's really economical. We fashioned these, we call them goat stakes. It's a steel pole with a spike on the bottom. So we can just tether them somewhere. They'll stay where we put them. They'll stay from falling off a cliff. They'll stay away from our garden because they're controlled, and they'll eat a small area. Now, some other goats have the horrible tendency to, if you give them an area, they will run to the end of the area, trample the really good grass, eat that last blade of grass on the other side of the fence, through the fence, because the grass on the other side is always greener.
That's just a goat thing.
Oh, stupid goats. Anyway, and trample the grass, and then well, I won't eat that. Somebody's walked on it. Well, that was you. You're not the smartest goat in the world. So we can do it typewriter style, where we can move the tether, and they will eat little swaths of grass at a time, which, if you don't have a ton of land, is far more important. That also leads into the discussion of parasites, because they kind of move over an area once and they eat it down. They don't.
Yeah, and they're not trampling back over what they're going to eat. So they eat and they walk and they eat and they walk and they sort of do this.
And they don't overlap with each other.
No, so I think we have a little bit more control. If there's a parasite problem with one goat, it may not spread to the rest because they're really not sharing the same space.
Yeah.
We do not have a herd of goats like a lot of people. I guess there's something idyllic to just having your goats all together and frolicking. It would be nice. It's not how our two larger goats were raised. So to try to integrate them into a herd like that would be a disaster. It's just not going to happen. And honestly, they hang out together, but they have separate spaces. It also means that if we need to feed them differently, if we need to care for them differently, it's easy. They all have their own houses, except for Tiny and Sassafras. They share because they're little. But other than that, they're separated, which most people don't do, and I think it may have some benefit.
It does. And in a place where parasites are very common and plentiful, we don't have a very much of a problem with it, and that's part of just the practice of how we do it. Now, downside of the tether is she will tangle around this and that, and they'll circle, and they'll tie a knot that science cannot explain. And you come over and you're like, I need like some big cutters and a thing, and I'm gonna have to unhook the goat and a science degree to get the goat out.
And that's part of why we put the carabiners that hook to their collar, so that you can easily undo it. If they get themselves tangled in a way you can't untangle, you can at least unhook the carabiner and free the goat, and then come back and take care of the rope, which I've had to do a few times.
And untie it from both ends.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is important. There's a couple of pieces of hardware here. There's a solid collar, of which we don't use the ring on it. There is a locking spring-loaded carabiner. The lock is definitely important. They are goats, they will escape. The swivel is also important. They will circle around for a while. Yes, hi. And they will circle and circle, and the rope can tie into knots, which can twist the collar and actually choke them. So the swivel there is actually very important. Otherwise, we use a good quality of a fairly thick rope. And that's probably 3/8 inch maybe. It's got a nice braid on it. The bigger size keeps it from wrapping around their leg and being a tourniquet, which the thinner ropes have a tendency to do. We've also never broken one of these. They will wear one out over a year, but they're easy to replace. And then for staking it, there's usually a couple of loops in it. There's one at the end of the rope. And there's one kind of a midpoint. Sometimes we want to put them in a small area or a cliff. So we've just tied a loop. Now she has a shorter one. And then sometimes we'll have like another knot on the other goats that have longer ones. That lets us kind of tailor where they are. If there's a cliff or something nearby but there's good grass, we want them to be able to get to it but not over. And you have to size it by the back end of the goat cannot make it over the cliff, not their head, because that could be a dangerous situation.
I think that for us, especially, we're home pretty much all the time. Someone is always home, which means we can be here. We can watch them. We're aware of where they are. I think if you were gone all day, the tethers would not be a good option.
Yeah, it requires a little bit of care. But the other answer is what? An 8-foot chain link fence?
For some of them.
Have you seen our property? Like, there's no way, and we'd have to move it all the time.
And it'd be a huge expense to it.
And goats still manage to get hung up on it, in it, over it.
Yeah. So there's, people talk about the safety risks of the tethers, which there are risks. It has happened. But there's also, I see all kinds of posts on all the forums about a goat that's gotten loose or free or hung up on a gate or a fence or something. This totally eliminates that problem. So I think that's one of those you have to pick what works for you. But we don't see this talked about a lot. They are fully on tethers all the time. That's kind of, how we raise, how we feed our goats. And we'll get into some of the other things about caring for the goats, caring for the other animals in a semi-holistic, semi-conventional way in the future. There's a lot of conversation to be had about that.
But there's you can't not discuss the cost side of that. If some people say, well, I have goats, how do you have them? Well, I have them in a dirt lot, and they get this bag of food and this thing and this mineral and this something else. What does that cost you per month? Wow, that's a lot. What do we pay for feed for our herd of goats? We give it a little extra bit of like grain supplement to the ones that are in milk, just as an extra caloric thing. It's not a lot. But otherwise, the rest of them, the nature, and goats can do that. So there's this huge cost change of like, what are you doing with your goats that makes it profitable, or even a break even, or are they just really pets? It's up to you. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of different ways. This is just ours. And it works out. They're all very happy and healthy and shiny. And yeah.
All right.
Well, this has been our episode on our goats. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share this with other people who may be interested in goats, and we'll see you on the next one.